All right, good morning, guys. Welcome to another episode of Swapology. Today we are working on the very first G35 that LOJ Conversions ever swapped. This is actually my old daily driver development car for our G35 350Z swap kits. It's a 2005 six-speed sedan with a 6-liter L76 in it out of a Pontiac G8. Right now the car is set up the same way it was when I owned it. It's the 6-liter and it's got a stock LS9 cam in it. Jeremy from Auto from Faster Proms tuned this. God, it's probably 2 or 3 years ago now at this point. I believe it made 410 wheel horsepower all motor. 6-speed manual, it's got the CD09 transmission in it. Pretty simple setup. Our headers, full actual single 3-inch exhaust because it's a sedan, not a coupe. And it was a daily driver for me for, 18 months I drove this thing. I want to say I put 22 or 23,000 miles on it and actually sold it to another client of LOJ Conversions, who is actually the owner, or was the owner, of the very first 300ZX that we ever swapped for a client. It's not the development car, but he was the very first customer of LOJ. You are probably familiar with the car. It's the one that was in the smoking tire video, the black 300ZX with the LS7 in it. But he ended up buying this car off of me when I put it up for sale to use as a daily driver. So he had both cars. He had that as his toy. This is his daily. Recently sold his 300ZX, downsizing to one car, trying to make smart financial decisions so he can buy a home for his family and things like that, which I totally get. I've been there myself. And today we're doing just a cam upgrade on this car as well as some suspension bits. The plan is, once he gets that house for the family and all those things, to actually put a blower on this like we've done on our Project Silver Bullet FX and like Matt Happel did on his Sloppy Mechanics G35. So for now, we're getting rid of that LS9 cam and actually putting in a Brian Tooley Racing Stage 2 Positive Displacement Supercharger cam. So it's a more aggressive cam than the LS9, but it's still got really nice streetable characteristics. It'll actually make decent power naturally aspirated too. We're not too worried about sacrificing or getting maximum NA power right now. It'll make more power than the LS9 cam, definitely more power than a stock LS3 cam. Does it leave something on the table naturally aspirated? Sure. The Positive Displacement Supercharger cams have a wide lobe separation angle for less overlap, so you don't get as much scavenging effect at high RPMs for naturally aspirated power, but they still make great power NA compared to a stock cam, so it'll make the car a little more fun to drive for now, and when he decides to put the blower on it a year or two from now, it'll be ready for it. When I originally built the car, I did pull the heads off of the L76 and did a DOD delete then. I used, I believe, a trick flow kit that came with new lifters, head gaskets, and all that stuff. And then I upgraded to ARP head bolts, not studs. So from the head gasket, head fastening perspective, being ready for boost, that's good to go. Like I said, we're just swapping in a little bit bigger cam today. The other thing we're gonna do today is actually not engine related. We're going to install some SPL Parts front upper control arms and rear camber arms to just help the alignment on this car. It's lowered slightly on factory, I believe it was 350Z revised springs in the front and G35 coupe springs in the rear. I mean, this is going back years for me, so I'm trying to remember. But it makes the sedan sit much lower than they did from the factory, and it's kind of on the edge of what you can adjust out with the factory adjusters. So what we're going to do is install some SPL parts, still leave those springs and shocks in there, but it'll allow him to get the alignment dialed in better because he is experiencing a little uneven tire wear in the back. But that's what we're going to be working on today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Check out this video, and we will talk to you later. All right, so in typical car owned by Javon fashion, nothing goes as planned, but we did get everything we set out to get done today complete. We did install all of the SPL suspension bits, the front upper control arms and the rear camber arms. We installed some SPC toe adjustment bolts for the rear. The reason we did that is because this car is actually still running on OEM style springs, which means we need a rear toe link with a spring bucket in it. And while SPL does make a spring bucket mid-link, unfortunately it's designed for coilover diameter springs, not factory diameter springs, so it wouldn't have worked for us. And we did need to increase the range of adjustment on toe. So we used some aftermarket bolts that give an extra, I think, degree of adjustment, which should be more than enough to get this thing back into spec once everything's dialed in. So all the suspensions install actually went together super smoothly. And considering this chassis has over 250,000 miles on it now, the fact that everything in the back on the suspension came apart as easily as it did was a real blessing. We were definitely sure to make sure we coated all of the bolts in an anti-seize compound before we put it all back together to make sure if it ever does have to come apart again, if the car goes to coilover someday, something like that, it'll all come apart smoothly. And then we moved on to the cam upgrade, which it's ironic. You know, you think you're gonna get X, Y, and Z done during a day and that they're gonna cause A, B, and C problems. I thought the suspension would be a battle. We tackled that first while the car was cooling down. And I thought it would be a battle because of, again, how many miles are on the chassis and that the stuff hasn't really been apart before. It went smooth. Then I thought the cam install, that's gonna go super smooth. That caused problems for us. We got the front timing cover apart and it actually turned out that the OEM style timing chain tensioner had broken. And for those of you that may not be aware, you can't change the timing chain tensioner without pulling the oil pump. You can't pull the oil pump without pulling the pickup tube off, and you can't pull the pickup tube off without dropping the oil pan. So that takes, in a G35, an additional, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours by the time you figure out a way to support the motor, drop the front cross member out, drop the oil pan, do all that, yada, yada. Fortunately, the way it failed, none of the parts fell into the pan. They were actually still laying there, and we were able to repair the tensioner in place. It lost some of its spring tension the way we repaired it, but Javon has plans a year from now to actually put an LSA blower on this car like we talked about earlier. And early LS motors, I'm talking like 97, 98, the early truck motors, they don't even have tensioners at all. They don't even have dampers. The chain just runs free on the cam and the crank. The way we set this up now, it functions a lot like an LS2 damper where there's a guide on each side of the chain, but it's not actively pressing on the chain to tension it. Is it ideal? No, but on the schedule that we had today, it was the only option to still get this car done in a reasonable amount of time. So we were able to make that work. And then we were also able to, or we also ended up having the T40 Torx countersunk bits that hold the cam retainer plate. We broke 3 T40 bits just trying to get them out. 1 came out, the other 3 were completely seized. So we ended up drilling them out and then using an easy out to pull what was left of the bolt out of the block. Again, another nightmare. What should have taken 2 minutes ended up taking, you know, way longer than it should have. We did end up getting the cam installed. Again, it's a stage 2 positive displacement supercharger cam. We got the new valve springs and retainers installed. That went smoothly. We checked push rod length and we ended up needing a stock length push rod. I wasn't sure if it was going to end up needing 50 thou longer or 50 thou shorter. We bought all 3 lengths before even starting the job, so whatever it ended up needing we would have, and I'm just going to return the ones that we didn't use. But it, you know, got essentially cam motion, dual springs and titanium retainers, cam motion, 080 wall chromoly push rods in stock length 7.400 inches. The cam is installed. We were able to get everything up front put back together. We got everything put back together and we get it fired up and we're, you know, warming it up to bleed out the air in the cooling system and all that stuff, and the belt's squeaking. And then of course Javon's like, yeah, it's been squeaking like that for a while. And I'm like, if we knew that when you showed up, we could have replaced all the belts and the pulleys, because they have, I don't know, 35, 40,000 miles on them at this point. One of the bearings is probably what's causing the noise. Of course, it's all together now and hot, so we're not changing it, but I gave Javon the part numbers. He can change those himself. He's pretty handy with his car when he gets home. He can order up the right pulleys and get that swapped. It's not a terrible job to do in the car. It's just kind of a terrible job to do when the motor is super hot, like it is after you bleed out the cooling system. We got the air conditioning recharged. That's blowing nice and cold. We basically got everything taken care of. We ran it with the scan tool on there. Fully hot. It's got 45 psi oil pressure at idle, like 80 psi when you rev it, which is awesome. So everything there is running good to go. And we're going to get this thing to the dyno next week. Jeremy's coming up to Gettysburg like he does from time to time to do some tuning. Javon and I will be heading out there. He'll be driving his car out there. The tune that's on it is good enough for it to run and drive right now. Obviously, you can't get on it or do any spirited driving the way it is, but you can mosey down the highway to get out to Gettysburg a couple hours with it the way it is. Then Jeremy will work his magic. Javon's actually going to get it aligned, I believe, tomorrow. So the alignment will be good. He has an appointment set up for that, and then the dyno is in a few days after that. We'll be bringing another customer's car out to the dyno as well. We'll do a separate video on that. So we'll both be out there getting cars tuned this coming week, and it was a pretty successful weekend. A lot of memories with this car. Again, I mean, this is the very first car that, very first G35 350Z platform car that we ever swapped. This was the development car. This is the car that got shipped out to Cook's so they could do the design work for us for engineering the headers. All of that stuff happened on this car. It was interesting to see some of the accessory drive parts are the very first prototypes that I machined myself here in the shop before we had the production units made. A lot of history with this car. It's so nice to know that it's still on the road. You know, I put over 20,000 miles on it. Javon's put 15,000 plus on it since he's bought it from me. He's still driving it every day. It's a super fun, super reliable car. Not a lot of people can say that they LS swap these cars and drive them every day and put 35, 40,000 miles on them without any real issues at all. I mean, a belt squeak because a bearing and a pulley went bad. It's really the only thing that's gone on in this car since it was completed. And Javon isn't easy on it. I wasn't easy on it when I had it. Did a lot of autocrossing, a lot of drag racing, a lot of fun times in this thing. So anyway, thanks so much for tuning into this video. Please like, subscribe, follow us here on YouTube, follow us on Facebook and on Instagram. Hit that notification bell so that you know when any new video comes out. Thanks again so much for tuning in. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.